Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. His administration's economic and North Korea policies dominate President Moon Jae-in's New Year's speech and press conference. We bring you the highlights. A former South Korean Supreme Court Chief Justice has been summoned by prosecutors to be questioned over alleged collusion to influence trials to get on the good side of the former Park Geun-hye administration. Plus, US President Donald Trump hails progress made in Washington's trade talks with China. Could it mean the trade war that has rocked the global economy could be nearing an end? So let's start with that New Year's press conference. President Moon Jae-in invited both Korean and international reporters to the press conference at the Blue House that happened on Thursday. He fielded a range of questions from local politics to North Korea. The South Korean leader emphasized his goal for 2019 is to help the people feel the benefit of his administration's economic policies. Our Go Ryun-hee starts us off.
President Moon Jae-in is standing by his administration's economic policies of growth led by rising incomes and innovation. During his first press conference marking the start of his third year in office, the president focused on the economy with the aim of getting tangible results, adding that his administration is taking the situation very seriously.
올해는 국민의 삶 속에서 정부의 경제 정책이 옳은 방향이라는 것을 확실히 체감되도록 하는 것이 목표입니다. 그러려면 성과를 보여야 합니다.
He added that if necessary, his administration is willing to make changes in order to build an innovative and inclusive nation. The president's income-driven growth policy aimed at boosting growth by raising household incomes has so far come up short. Raising the minimum wage by double-digit percentages and shortening the work week prompted some small businesses to let go of their part-timers and hamper job growth. Speaking of jobs, the president promised to improve the quality of employment in the new year, as he himself acknowledged that the jobs numbers failed to meet the public's expectations. Korea's unemployment rate came in at 3.8% last year, the highest since 2001 when the figure was at 4%. To help support the country's economy, President Moon called for innovation to revitalize Korea's industries and nurture new sectors. And the policy of innovative growth, the president said, is linked with the peace drive on the Korean peninsula.
이 남북 경협이야말로 우리 경제에 그야말로 새로운 활력을 불어넣는 그리고 그런 기회는 우리에게만 있는 것이죠. 그게 우리가 언제 그것을 짠하고 사용할 수 있게 될지는 잘 모르지만 어쨌든 우리에게 예비되어 있는 하나의 축복 같은 것이라고 나는 생각합니다.
And to that end, the president added that Seoul is willing to reopen the joint inter-Korean factory park in the North Korean city of Kaesong, as well as tours to the North Mount Kumgang as part of the two sides' joint economic projects. Go Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
So let's stay with that press conference, the New Year's event that was held at the Blue House on Thursday. President Moon Jae-in addressed the nation and spoke to members of the press, as we just heard, about a whole number of topics, including the economy, anti-corruption measures, and, of course, his diplomatic efforts and successes with North Korea. He used the opportunity to urge Pyongyang to take relevant, bold steps on denuclearization if it wants sanctions lifted. Our presidential office correspondent Shin Se-min has this report.
With multiple high-stakes summits coming up between Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington, President Moon Jae-in called on North Korea to take bold steps towards denuclearization. He revisited the idea of getting exemptions from sanctions to speed up the regime's process, but also said ultimate sanctions relief depends on the speed of the North's denuclearization.
대북 제재의 빠른 해결을 위해서는 우선 북한이 실질적인 비핵화 조치를 보다 좀 과감하게 할 필요가 있다고 생각하고 또 북한이 그런 조치를 취하는 대로 계속해서 북한의 계속된 비핵화를 말하자면 촉진하고 독려하기 위해서 그에 대한 상응 조치들도 함께 강구돼 나가야 한다고 생각합니다.
The president said he hopes denuclearization will be sped up by the declaration of an official end to the Korean War. As for the presence of U.S. troops in South Korea, President Moon said it has nothing to do with the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which he noted includes both the North and military commitments by the U.S. President Moon said Kim Jong-un understands this, adding that whether U.S. troops are stationed in the South is entirely up to Seoul and Washington and won't be part of the nuclear talks. When it comes to the definition of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization, President Moon said there is no difference in understanding between Kim Jong-un and the international community. And speaking about a possible second meeting between Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, the South Korean leader said it may be imminent following Kim's surprise trip to Beijing this week to meet President Xi Jinping. And the South Korean leader expressed optimism that this time Kim and Trump will produce an agreement that's more clear on actions to be taken by each side.
머지않은 시기에 개최될 2차 북미 정상회담과 김정은 위원장의 서울 답방은 한반도 평화를 확고히 다질 수 있는 또 하나의 전환점이 될 것입니다.
The South Korean leader promised to keep the ball rolling this year and even to speed up his push for peace. And as for that visit to Seoul by North Korea's Kim Jong-un, which has been delayed, President Moon expects that summit to take place after that possibly imminent summit of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrived back in Pyongyang on Thursday after wrapping up his fourth visit to China. The North State-run Korean Central News Agency called the trip to Beijing historic and one that boosted ties between the two countries. Jae-in with the details.
In an English-language dispatch Thursday, the state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that Kim Jong-un's train arrived at Pyongyang railway station at 3 p.m. on Thursday after his fourth visit to China. Calling the trip historic, the report said Kim worked to boost the traditional friendship and solidarity between the people of both countries as required by the new era. Chinese media remained tight-lipped throughout Kim's stay in the country. Watchers say this may have been Beijing's effort to avoid irritating the U.S. when the atmosphere is being created for a second Pyongyang-Washington summit. However, China media outlets reported Thursday that during the summit, the two leaders vowed efforts to draw worthy results from Kim's second summit with President Trump. Chinese President Xi Jinping also reportedly voiced his support for another round of talks between Kim and Trump. In Washington, the U.S. State Department and the White House had earlier declined to comment on reports of Kim's visit to China. However, in an interview with CNBC, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo praised China's support in trying to resolve the North Korea issue, adding it's separate to their dispute over trade. Diplomatic sources say President Xi will probably visit North Korea at some point soon, making him the first Chinese leader to do so since 2005. Jae-in, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is having a working lunch with lawmakers of the ruling party leadership. He will do so at the top office later today. The Blue House says that the purpose of the meeting is largely for the sake of New Year's greetings, but the attendees are also likely to discuss pending issues. The president is also likely to call on the ruling party lawmakers for their bipartisanship in handling some pending bills and issues in the National Assembly. He also had a working dinner on Thursday with ministers ahead of a cabinet reshuffle that is expected to take place in the coming weeks. U.S. President Donald Trump says his administration's trade negotiations with China are, quote, having tremendous success. He made the remark on Thursday as he took off to the U.S. border with Mexico on the 20th day of a partial shutdown of the US government. He also said China was far more honourable and easier to deal with than members of the opposition Democratic Party. During their meeting in Beijing this week, the US trade representative and Chinese officials focused on China's promise to buy more American products such as agricultural and industrial goods. Now, US President Donald Trump is threatening to declare a national emergency to bypass Congress so he can get funding for his wall along the US-Mexico border. His comments came as he visited the southern border to bolster his case for it. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Arirang. Adam, no love lost between Trump and the Democrats at the moment, and this all means the impasse continues.
That's right, Mark. President Trump's standoff with the Democrats has prompted a partial government shutdown, as many know, that has now stretched into its 20th day. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are either on leave or working without pay. Trump arrived in Texas on Thursday, again threatening to use emergency powers to bypass Congress and get his $5.7 billion for the wall, which the Democrats have refused to give him.
This is a common sense argument. Now, if for any reason we don't get this going and they're not going to act responsibly and they don't mind death and crime and all of the problems that they cause by not having a barrier, then you will see what happens with national emergency, which I can do very easily.
Trump had been on the fence about his trip, casting doubt on whether it would change the dynamics of his talks with the opposition. But after his national address earlier this week, his advisers reportedly urged him to make the visit in order to scale up his messaging. His trip also comes after he abruptly walked out of negotiations with the Democrats on Wednesday. Meanwhile, soon after his arrival in Texas, President Trump tweeted he is cancelling his trip later this month to the World Economic Forum in Davos. He blamed the Democrats for his decision, citing what he called their intransigence on border security. The Democrats said they do support border security, but said there was a better way to go about it. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. will, quote, expel every last Iranian boot from Syria as he seeks to reassure Middle Eastern allies that Washington is not abandoning the region. In a keynote speech delivered in Cairo on Thursday, Pompeo called for a common stand against Tehran.
We urge every country to take meaningful action to crush terrorism and denounce its ideological roots. You'll not fight these battles alone. Our robust battle against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist groups will continue.
Pompeo also criticized former President Barack Obama's Middle Eastern policy, saying he made dire misjudgments that emboldened Iran to entrench its influence across the region. The Secretary's address was largely in line with previous speeches from President Trump.
And I've told each of the leaders here in the
Thank you as always to our Arirang for the world news there. We are going to stick with the big stories making the headlines around the globe. Nicolas Maduro has been sworn in for a second 6-year term as Venezuela's president. The ceremony was boycotted by a great many of the world's democratic nations. They regard Maduro as a dictator heading up what is an illegitimate government. For an expert's take on this issue, we're going to connect via Skype to Fernando Jauregui in Caracas. He is a journalist who has worked very closely with big international media outlets such as AP and CNN. Fernando, we'd like to start by asking you, there are claims that Maduro won this election. It was a manufactured election in which most of his political opponents were barred from running at all, and in which the Venezuelan people were either coerced into voting for Maduro or simply didn't even show up at the polling stations. From what you've seen, would you say that's a fair assessment?
Well, very close. Actually, there has been a lot of questioning on the fairness of the National Election Council, that is the one that runs the elections in Venezuela. Plus, it's a fact that Maduro government and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez, had used government resources in transportation, financing, and especially of the large network of radio and TV in hands of the government. So therefore, there is a huge advantage in the government hands that left from far the capacity of opposition of making a fair campaign. Plus, they make a special effort to make people doubt of the fact that their vote was going to be reflected once they did it. So many people absent themselves for going to vote because they did not trust the National Election Council.
And do you think the current economic situation in Venezuela, a lot of people saying the economy is in free fall, inflation is astronomical. Do you think it really can continue much longer the way it's going?
No, it's really hard because also lately, many people close of the Chavismo movement are deserting, you know, from the Maduro governments. And you see every day more and more people getting apart from the Chavismo process as the things in Venezuela get worse, because it's not only the economic deep crisis, as you mentioned before, but basic services in Venezuela are really terrible.
And Fernando, just before we let you go, can you tell us what life is like for most people like yourself in Venezuela these days?
Well, actually, it's very hard for the reasons I mentioned before, but to all those problems referring to the shortage of food, medicines, services, and people can stay without electricity sometimes for 48 hours. You have that even living in a middle-class place, 40% of the Venezuelan people do not receive water every day. On top of all that, you have to add the crime rate in Venezuela. Last year, we have over 20,000 killings, you know, in hands of the human crime, and a lot of that too in the hands of many of the security forces in Venezuela. So to all the poor quality of life that somebody like me, and especially poor people, is having, you have to add the fact that you don't know if you are coming back home, because you can be killed, you can be robbed, or you can be hurt, you know, going to your work, coming back, or in anything you on the street.
Well, it's truly shocking. And Fernando, there in Caracas, thank you ever so much for your insights. It's really astonishing in a bad way what's happening over there. And hopefully you've opened many people's eyes to the situation in Venezuela, especially to our Korean viewers. It's all the way on the other side of the world, of course, so they might not know just how bad it is over there, but we hope you stay safe and well, and thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, back here in Korea, former Supreme Court Chief Justice Yang Sung-tae entered the prosecutor's office a few moments ago to be questioned about his alleged involvement in the abuse of power at the judiciary. Before he entered the building, the ex-top court chief said he apologizes for what happened during his term and is willing to take responsibility. He said he will answer questions diligently and asked for prosecutors to proceed without any preconceptions. Yang was the Supreme Court's Chief Justice from 2011 to 2017. He's accused of using trials as bargaining chips in the Supreme Court's dealings with the previous Park Geun-hye administration to achieve his long-envisioned plan of establishing a separate courts of appeals. He will be the first former Chief Justice to appear before prosecutors as a criminal suspect. The probe continues into Olympic short track champion Shim Sok-hee's claims that her former coach, Jo Jae-bom, repeatedly sexually assaulted her. And as that rumbles on, a wave of fresh allegations looks set to rock the Korea Skating Union. According to former short track coach Yeo Jun-hyung, more active Korean skaters are set to file complaints against former coach Jo and other coaches as well. No names have been revealed yet, but Yeo says there may be 5 to 6 other incidents, 2 of which have already been confirmed by the victims themselves. Now let's turn our focus to the ongoing 2019 Consumer Electronics Show. South Korea's tech giants, including Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, are showcasing their latest products and innovations, including smart devices, TVs, and even robots. Our Kim Hae-sung reports from Las Vegas.
The Internet of Things. All home appliances, including TVs, fridges, and washing machines, are connected by AI or an AI speaker, eliminating the need for a remote controller to actually do laundry or clean the floor. Samsung and LG Electronics also unveiled wearable robots that help with physical rehabilitation. And they've struck a deal with Apple to enrich their content by providing movies and TV shows from iTunes on their smart TVs. And here comes the massive curve of nature. A wall made up of 246 55-inch OLED TV panels, flexible and crisp images that make for an immersive experience.
The 65-inch flexible OLED TV is LG's first commercially viable version that can roll back into the tube, play music, or show the time when the display is off.
It has a unique design and can also save you some wall or living room space and will be available for purchase by this year. Samsung Electronics also showcased its HK QLED TV, which has the company's clearest pictures yet. An elevating car that can move along extreme terrain, do search and rescue operations, and get people to places where a normal car cannot.
The Elevate concept car is an experimental vehicle that combines robotics and car together, using robotic actuators and electric wheels to provide a car with extreme mobility capability.
Hyundai Motors also released new car infotainment services like systems that can detect your mood through your heartbeat and facial expression and turn on exciting or peaceful music or send some pulsating rhythms through the actual car seat. Korea's internet port giant Naver won a CES Innovation Award this year for its 5G-enabled robotic arm that can be used in real time and controlled from remote locations with extremely low latency. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News, Las Vegas.
Samsung Electronics is going to hold an event in San Francisco next month to unveil the Galaxy S10. Samsung was expected to announce the S10 series at the Mobile World Congress 2019 in Barcelona later this year, but the company says it brought it forward so it can launch the smartphone on the 10th anniversary of the Galaxy range. Watchers also say Huawei's debut of its first foldable smartphone at the Mobile World Congress could have played a role in Samsung's decision to change the date. Samsung is yet to confirm the release of its first foldable smartphone.
Good morning. Not much to worry about temperature-wise. Daily highs will be a couple of notches higher than yesterday, getting up to 5 degrees in Seoul, Daegu topping out at 8 degrees with some clouds expected. Meanwhile, light rain is in the forecast for Jeju Island this evening. But don't forget to take your face mask with you when heading out. The ultra-fine dust advisory is likely to be expanded to more areas as the day goes on, because it's very likely that ultrafine dust levels will remain high, especially in western regions, and we can also expect to see poor air quality into the weekend. So do use a mask and let's wash our hands frequently. Meanwhile, we are still waiting for rain to ease the dryness in the air, with dry weather alerts being in place for nearly a month across the country. But the warm weather continues, and it could even feel like early spring over the weekend, with temperatures hovering way above these seasonal averages. But again, it's going to be quite dusty. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us on Arirang TV. We'll have our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. But if we don't see you, have a wonderful weekend. Until next time, goodbye.